Black Lance, Reed Campbell,
Here.
Tom Hagelin,
Here?
Sue Kern,
Here.
Ruth Nelson,
Here.
Bob Nystrom. 4 of the 6 present.
Okay, thank you. And please join me with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. And of course, we'll continue to have these school board meetings via electronic method, as we have been for the last few months here. And I would ask for approval of the agenda as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Motion by Director Nelson, second by Director Campbell for approval. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. We'll move right in then to our 3 agenda items. First one being Equity Advisory Task Force meeting update. Maybe we'll make mention that Director Nystrom has entered the room. All rise.
Are we really going
Huh?
I'm going to take this. I was hoping that Charles was going to piggyback on this with me today, but yesterday we had our first large group equity task force meeting, and it was a really nice meeting. There were 9 people who attended, and the majority of the meeting was really about learning about people's experiences with equity, both in their lives and also within our school district, and the things that the community believes that we do well, and things that they'd like to, how we want to move forward to talk about improvements that we might be able to make as we go forward. One of the really nice things that we decided is that we're going to meet fairly regularly and report to the board as promised. And Tim, at our next meeting, is going to pull together the data on some of our demographic information for that meeting. And that's actually where we're going to start. And then we're going to talk about what we need to do for as far as training, professional development, and getting everyone within the district on the same page as far as equity in the future. And really, that is the gist of my report, because it was absolutely a very nice meeting just to learn and to start building trust with some people that we haven't met before. And so it was really a great meeting, and so I just wanted the board to know that we are underway and getting started for big systemic change in the future. So that's all I have to say.
So you mentioned there are 9 present. Is that
Yep.
the size of the committee, or is the committee even larger?
No, we started with a small task force. We have a number of names, but we decided that we wanted to start fairly small so that the new people that we were meeting could help decide what direction we went. And the community members that were there still feel that they'd like to keep it at a dozen to 14 at the very most to get started, and then we'll go from there. And so there were just a number of people that were unable to attend, so.
And then one last question. Do you anticipate maybe another update within 30, 60 days?
Yep, that's what I told them. We're going to, right now, our next meeting is after school starts, so it's giving us some time just to work on getting school going this year. So they're probably towards the end of September, we'll be able to report on the next meeting that we had together. And we'll give just a little update after we've had these meetings. So absolutely, we'll keep the board informed, so. Yep.
What are the names of the community members so far? Do you have that? Or?
Yeah,
Yep.
how about if I just show you
Sure,
my little
thank you.
list? So the ones that were there were on yellow, so, yeah, so.
Okay, great. Any questions, comments? Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And thanks for the committee and the group too that is working on this.
Yep.
Appreciate that.
Yep.
All right, next up will be the back to school, how we're going to handle this. And I don't, is Heidi and Tim going to lead us through this? Okay.
We are. So thank you for your time. First, Tim and I would like to start with the significant amount of thank yous that need to take place. Thank you for that. We have, since the start of this process, which started for us in March, been working with parents, students, our certified staff, our support staff, custodial, clerical, our union leadership, and our building principals, and tremendous time, energy, and effort, discussions, and planning has gone into place. And Tim and I want to thank them. We've had difficult conversations, emotional conversations, long hours, late nights. It has not been a quiet summer for any of those people that I've just listed to thank. And in addition, we want to thank Superintendent Larson and you as our Brainerd Public Schools Board of Education for your leadership and support, because this is truly, in my 27 years now in Brainerd Public Schools, something I've never thought we'd be experiencing. We have been working diligently under the direction of Governor Walz's executive order to come up with plans, and we decided our first priority was to establish goals. So no matter what we were discussing or where we were going to head in our planning, we needed to have very clear goals that all parties involved could be in agreement with. That first goal was to prioritize the safety of our students and staff. Number one, no matter what, our safety of our students and staff are our utmost priority in our planning. Our second goal was to prioritize in-person learning, especially for our youngest learners and our learners who are most at risk or needing the most specialized needs. In addition, we wanted to implement learning models using the governor's order of the science-based formula that's been provided by the Minnesota Department of Health and under the direction of our current local public health officials. And finally, we wanted to support planning and flexibility that differentiate approaches to teaching and learning, which in those plans, because of the governor's order, we need to be able to move very fluidly from in-person learning to a hybrid model to distance learning, really at any moment in time, given the data that's occurring within our local region. Those were the goals that we adhered to. This is kind of the journey we've been on.
If you recall, back around the beginning in March 15th, that's when we all got the call to come back in Sunday afternoon. We spent the day here and we started the plans to respond to the governor's call to close schools, plan for distance learning, reopen, and then execute the distance learning. So between March 15th and the 29th, administrators, teachers, community members, we had meetings, we had plans, we put together the plan that we were going to execute at that time. By March 30, we had begun distance learning. By May 1st and May 4th, we were then taking time to plan for end-of-year assessments, because the original work in distance learning did not include an idea of it lasting more than 3 weeks. And so now we've been told that we're going to be in distance learning to the end of the year. In May 22nd was the last day of distance learning. That was an important day in a district. It was a big sigh of relief. The job had been done to the best of our ability. During the month of June, we executed a very in-depth after-action review of all decisions and actions taken around distance learning. We pulled every document, every agenda, minutes of every single meeting. Over 250 documents were reviewed, and we put together timelines of how decisions were made from March 13th all the way through the 1st of June to go back and understand, how did we do the things that we did? Did the things that we thought would work, or did they not work? We surveyed at that point families, staff, and students about their experience in distance learning. All that information from the after-action review and from the surveys then funnels to June 22nd through the 24th, where the administrators, during their administrative retreat, sifted through all this to identify what things did we want to preserve, what challenges did we face in the spring that we struggled to overcome. That became the foundation for the hybrid and distance learning plans that we're bringing forward to you today, in addition to traditional instruction. Where are we at right now? Well, July 30th would be the next step here on the journey. This is when the governor indicated to us that you had to have your plans. Here are the rules for it. Here's the science-based model. We appreciate that MDE gave us benchmarks to understand when we should move between regular instruction, hybrid learning, and distance instruction. Those are not decisions that districts should be making on their own. They are too significant. We're very good at handling data in Brainerd Public Schools, but we are not epidemiologists. That's their role. They give us good guidance, and we appreciate it. So here we are bringing forward to you the options for the plans that we have. Hopefully on August 6th, We'll have today is August 6th, we'll have the presentation of our work. The next steps after that are on August 10th. We hope that you approve the plans that we're bringing forward to you today.
Tim, what kind of percentage of surveys did you get back?
We got a very high hit rate. Usually, we're really excited if we get between a fifth and a quarter of respondents. I think we got somewhere in the range of 75 to 80% of respondents. We have about 6,800 kids, early childhood, through the whole program. So many families have multiple kids in the system. So when you got 3,500 responses from families, you're pretty close to 4,500, 5,000 students is what you're accounting for. That's a tremendously high hit rate.
And that's part of the thank you. They've been highly engaged.
Yep.
And if they haven't been able to complete the survey data, we've been taking phone calls and having conversations with those families, listening and trying to respond to what they've identified as needs. So this is the Safe Learning Plan for Minnesota that was laid out by your It's really looking at number of cases per 10,000. They're localized within our county of residents. As you can see, 0 to 9 is in-person learning. When we get 10 to 19, they're still allowing in-person learning for elementary students. Reason being is they're finding out that transmission amongst our littles or our youngers is not as rapid or as common. So there's the science behind that. But once we start to get into our secondary students and middle schoolers, they have a more rapid rate of transmission. So when we hit that 10 to 19, in-person can still occur for our elementary, but by the time we get there, we need to start moving into a hybrid model for our secondary students. When we get into the next range, their recommendation is hybrid learning for all students. If we get into the next range, we can continue to hybrid learn for elementary, but now pushing distance for the secondary. And if we get to the 50 plus per 10,000, it will mean distance learning for all of our students. This is what it means in Crow Wing County. So you see that state model that Governor Walz released. Now if you have the numbers based on our county population, this is what it would look like. So in that 0 to 9 range, we have 0 to 58 cases per 10,000 is what would fall for that. So that's what's been very appreciated with the direct contact we now have with Crow Wing County Public Health, is to be able to have this exact data and the exact numbers that we need to look at. Where are we trending right now? That was a part of our big discussion. Here's our current trend. As of 2 weeks ago, our count would have been 2.1 cases per 10,000. As of today, actually this is now as of yesterday, we are at 7.7. Okay, the prior 14 days at 2.15, and now 14 days later, 7.7. Michelle Moritz is the public health county supervisor that we're working with. She said based on calculations and what they're seeing, they anticipate that by the time we get to September 8th and the opening of a school, we will fall in the range of 20 to 29 cases, which according to the guidance means we're in a hybrid model learning for all. The other thing that she reported is we're now starting to have, Crow Wing County is starting to have confirmed positive cases in our younger population. So there are some children that are starting to test positive. They aren't being able to provide that data specific to children yet, so that's what she's asking for. She's looking for more of that specific child-based data. So knowing this, we obviously know what in-person learning looks like. We love it. That's what we're the best at. That's what we all went into the business for. After the spring, we have a good experience of what distance learning looks like. And I can tell you based on all of that action review that Tim talked about, there are things that we have refined in our distance learning model based on the feedback we received directly from our students, our families, and our teachers. What we'd really like to do then is to spend time of, based on the discussions we have, what does a hybrid model look like for Brainerd Public Schools? And that's what we're going to spend time talking about. Unless you have questions where you want to talk about in-person and distance, we'll be happy to have those, but it seems like the big question is, if we need to go into hybrid, what is hybrid going to be? So again, prioritizing our youngest learners. In a hybrid model, all of our elementary students will be coming to school every day, and they will be divided into grade level cohorts. The reason we're saying cohorts is because, again, when we get into hybrid, the direction is we need to be at 50% capacity within the space, and if we cannot follow strict social distancing guidelines, we need to remove or reduce the number of students that are in that space. Fantastic news for Brainerd Public Schools. Baxter Elementary has beautiful larger spaces. Nisswa Elementary has beautiful larger spaces. Garfield Elementary has some beautiful larger spaces. So there are opportunities where based on the section or enrollment in that class, they may be with that same teacher in the same room because they can be less than 50% occupancy and they can be strictly socially distanced. However, we may be overloaded in someone. That's why we call it a cohort, meaning we may have to create another section of that grade level, but again, it's gonna allow for that in-person contact every day for our elementary students. The recommendation to do that, though, is to do it within a shortened school day. Much like we did with early outs, reason for this is we have teachers who are gonna be required to crosswalk. They're gonna be required to do in-person learning. They're also gonna be required to do distance learning. Because families have the option to choose distance learning for the entire year. So we need our staff to be able to have time to meet and have daily contact with those students. We need our staff to have time to collaborate with one another. Our staff will tell you that distance learning was 10 times harder than in-person learning, and they've spent hours upon hours of providing that instruction. So it's vital we give them that collaboration time, but this still prioritizes us being able to have our elementary kids with us every single day.
Plus lesson planning time.
Well, lesson planning
Yeah.
time, communication with families, all those. And the other thing is, if you look at the cleaning protocols and things we're gonna need to follow as well, this is allowing time to have that cleaning that can occur on a daily basis, because we have our custodial staff, as well as all of our staff in the building we're going to have to be following cleaning procedures in order to safely bring our kids to and from school every day.
So
Second,
will
sorry.
Will the teacher be able to do the online recording or whatever at the same time they're teaching to the in-person students, or?
So, I'm gonna let Tim
My
answer that,
question.
because we do have a plan for that.
That would be dependent upon what the learning target that the teacher is trying to fulfill. There are some times it will be best for the student to participate digitally in what the whole class is doing, watching, okay, participating live. There'll be times when it'll be better for the teacher to have the material flipped for the student, videotaped, pushed out during that time for them to work on. What drives that answer is what's the nature of the instruction that's occurring. And again, in order to have that dual responsiveness to student leads, that's going to require the extra time.
And here's what we anticipate. We're gonna have vulnerable students and vulnerable staff. Our goal is with our vulnerable staff, there may be an option for our families who are choosing that full-time distance learning option, that vulnerable staff member can be creating a learning cohort with that grade level and providing that instruction. So those are all the options that we're gonna have to look at. When we talk about flexible and adaptable learning and instruction, this is part of that. We will align those teachers with our student needs. We're gonna protect our staff and align with their needs. But we have to create a myriad, a menu of options, and they have to be closely related and fluid to one another in order to do that. So we included our secondary grades 5 through 12. What does hybrid instruction look? We're gonna start with 6th through 8th, and then we'll get back to 5th grade for a very specific reason. When we move into secondary, we're really looking at what you're gonna hear called an AABB model. What it means, if I'm in an A group or a B group, I'm gonna be in person 2 days a week in the building, and I'm gonna be doing 3 days a week of my synchronous online digital learning. This allows for students to have 2 days back-to-back direct instruction in person with their teacher, and then moving on to that digital learning. So if I'm a 6th through 8th grader, it means I will either be coming Monday, Tuesday, and then in my digital learning Wednesday through Friday, or I'll be coming Thursday, Friday, and then my digital learning Monday through Wednesday. This will also happen on a shortened school day. Reasons very similar. Like we talk about the responsibilities that teachers are gonna have to crosswalk between in-person and that distance learning option. 5th grade. Here's where, in talking with John, when you reduce 50% capacity in your middle school, it allows you to bring 5th graders in all day, every day. Those students will still follow an AABB schedule, because that's how we can align teaching staff with their needs. But again, they're gonna be able to be in those buildings and in person daily on that shortened day. Why? Because again, we've reduced that capacity in the building, we can socially distance them apart and provide that instruction. So K-5 every day. 9-12, very similar to 6-8. They're gonna be on that AABB schedule. I'll be in person 2 days in instruction, and then I'll be doing my synchronous learning the other 3 days. We felt this was extremely vital. When you look at the high school that has over 200 classes, this is allowing, and I have Tim talk more about a synchronous schedule. that if I'm a hands-on CTE learner, I need to be able to physically come in and complete welding and woodworking. If you switch to all distance, that's not allowing some of that direct hands-on work that needs to occur.
Heidi, could I ask a question?
Yep.
Yeah.
So fifth grade will be with K through 4. Will they be in the elementary school? They'll be at Forest View?
They'll be
They'll
at
be at
Forest.
Forest View.
Okay.
Once Forest View grades 6 through 8 move to hybrid and the 50% occupancy reduces them to that AABB schedule, you're essentially emptying out a good portion of Forest View. So we had the space, the ability, and the staff to service fifth grade in its entirety with a couple modifications. We couldn't pass up that opportunity to keep our kids with them. And fifth grade in the age group models falls in that elementary group, so it's preferable to bring them back in. Again, this comes back to servicing, prioritizing our youngest and neediest learners.
Okay. Thank you.
Unfortunately, as with anything in education, there's a little bit of edgy speak and a little bit of vocabulary that's got to be shared out. And the new term is synchronous. And you know that it wouldn't be a presentation with me without some kind of new term. The term synchronous means a scheduling concept. We're synchronizing the schedules of students who are in person, who are in distance learning, and who have chosen distance learning. Because there's two kinds of distance learning. There's the distance learning that we are forced into by virtue of whatever the infection rate of the county is. And then there's the distance learning that parents and families may choose because they feel it's the safest and most appropriate for their child. Either way, all these schedules are synchronized in that they're all assigned to their teacher. And their teacher will be servicing them either in person or in distance learning. That's that blended model of instruction that we're working with. So when we talk about synchronous schedules, we're talking about no matter what we're in, regular education, hybrid, or distance, the child's primary or first essential teacher does not change. Their schedule stays the same. One of the big things we learned from distance learning last spring was schedules matter. Start time, end times, transition times. High structure is our friend when dealing with youth learning. So we've made sure that we've built 7-period schedules for the middle school and the high school like they've always had, compress some of the instructional time to give us time for the collaboration and the prep work that needs to occur and the cleaning work that needs to occur in the building. But the students stay with their teacher, regardless of whether we're regular instruction, in hybrid, or in distance. There will be some modifications and some nip and tucks on some of those just to make the staffing models work, but that framework will exist for everyone, essentially grades 5 through 12. With K4 already being together in their cohorts, there'll be some possible minor adjustments there as we add sections, as you said, to modify and float numbers to make sure we're in capacity requirements for elementary classrooms. But again, not major change for kids. Kids will stay with their teachers, because what did we see suffer the most last spring, apart from academic achievement, was relationships. And the damage done to relationships, the inability for those relationships to be fostered and leveraged, is what was a barrier for learning. So we're trying to come back to, keep this as close to what we're already very good at, which is classroom instruction.
And how long will the school day be?
So when we look at early release, you look at a release right around 1:45-ish. We don't want to give hard, fast start-end times, because the hard data we don't have is who needs to ride the bus. So when we look at getting through this, we are going to ask that parents fill out an enrollment form, enrolling in the option that they're choosing, because we need that hard, fast data of who's on the bus so we can start mapping and planning. Because the other clear thing is 50% capacity on our buses. Okay? We're 515 square miles. We run a lot of bus routes to bring a lot of kids into our district. And when we can only have 50% capacity in a bus, that creates some challenges. So we're strongly encouraging our families, those who can pick up and drop off. Our parent survey data with high respondents, over 55% of our families said they're planning that already. We do need to encourage anybody who can, the grandmas, the aunts, the uncles, the families and members. That's safer for our kids. we know we're gonna have issues with, because we can't congregate in large groups, where it's gonna create issues for us in pickup and drop off. Those are all the minutiae that we are now gonna spend the next long days and evenings tackling and looking at. You know, we spent all the time on safe and secured entrances. Our goal was to funnel every kid through one door. Well, we're gonna have to have staff at doors. You know, we have to do health screenings. There's all these layers to this that have been considered as we've gone through every ounce of this plan. The final details will come in a very comprehensive document that's underway. I can't imagine how many pages it's gonna be when we're finally done, that details those things. But now it's gonna matter, and the data matters. We need to know which kids are coming, so we can start to say, here's our start and our end time. It should be very similar, though, to an early out and
So
preserving
it's about
about.
an hour and a half shorter, 2 hours?
It's, well, elementary usually gets out about 2:45, so if you look at a dismissal at 1:45 and a bus coming at 2, you're looking at about a 45-minute to an hour change in their day. But again, we might have to have staggered pickups, staggered drop-offs in order to meet those capacity rules. Our goal was to preserve 5 hours of instruction. 5 hours of instruction in person is our goal. You know, with some of our buildings, do we have the capacity where we could literally split classes in half and meet strict social distancing guideline? We do, but we don't have twice as many teachers to do that. So it is getting very creative with occupancy loads, with the numbers of students who choose to be in person, or who can be in person. The other thing these plans are very cognizant of is, let's say a student tests positive in that classroom. Now they're out 14 days. They don't want to lose a relationship with that teacher. Teacher doesn't want to lose a relationship with that student. We've created flexibility and adaptability through that synchronous schedule of being able to keep that kid engaged, to keep that child connected, to keep that relationship intact.
Well, okay. And plus, as far as kids there's going to be a lot more kids out sick because we want them to stay home if they
We
don't.
want them to stay home, and we don't want to, I mean, this, and if, there's a whole facet of a mental health plan for our students too. The mental health of our children
Yeah.
and their families have suffered greatly during this time. I think all of us have been impacted that way. How do we support that in schools? We support that with relationships with our staff. You know, they need that contact. We have to provide every opportunity, and we really, again, with that focus of safety. When I say safety, I include the well-being and mental health of our kids. That's included in this plan.
Let's say a distance learner is really struggling. Is there a mechanism in place where they can get special help to work through those issues?
You know, our goal this time in distance learning is, again, if they're signing up, is to keep them directly contacted in that synchronous schedule. Or if I'm in elementary, more than likely with a teacher. So, for example, this is where our brains are going. Again, we don't have the hard, fast data to do it yet. But I assume I'm going to have a vulnerable staff member that is not going to be allowed to come in the building. Let's say it's a second grade teacher. I have 22 second grade students in Brainerd Public Schools who've chosen distance learning. Our goal would be to partner them. Now, it means those 22 second graders may be coming from all 6 elementaries, but they are now a second grade class with a second grade teacher, and they are now going to engage in that learning. So we're looking, all that feedback that we got from parents that didn't go well for them, and students, I mean, from our local data to our statewide data, it's that connection piece. So we are going to have that opportunity. The other thing is creating platforms that look very similar. Sarah Porish and her tech team have done a phenomenal job when you get to see the help center that's been created. I mean, if I don't know how this works, there's a video I can watch as a parent, and it's, you know, because kids tend to figure it out. The nice thing too about us starting with in-person contact, we're going to be practicing those routines. We're going to be practicing those apps. Students are going to be in-person learning, but they're also going to be practicing what it might look if they have to be in a distance learning scenario before they ever have to get there. That was also a priority. Internet access, all those pieces. So the things that we've done in distance learning, we nailed it out of the park the best we could. If you compare to a lot of our districts around the state, Brainerd Public Schools did an amazing job. But we can do it 10 times better, and we're ready to do it 10 times better. But yes, we'll have that help. Our most at-risk learners, our goal is to have them with us every day. So that's the other part in this plan when we get to alternative instruction. There's students who need more help. Pre-K, actually all the way birth to 21, where we need to provide those services.
Can I ask a question? When you did your surveys with the parents, you said you had around 3,500 that had questions. What percentage of them wanted distance learning?
We saw about 300 out of the 3,500 who were very adamant that they do not feel comfortable allowing their child to come in the building.
300 families or 300 students?
300 families. So again, that's the hard data that we still, that's the minute, we're getting you, the Board of Education, this information first. Our next step is we need to get this to our staff. And immediately, once it's in front of our staff, we want to get this to our parents so they can make an educated decision and the best decision for their child. Then once we have that data, and we'll get to those next steps, I'm jumping ahead in our presentation, but we're going to take that so we can have that direct answer to see what we're going to do.
And you're gonna walk the board through the enrollment form and
Correct.
such too, so you'll get to see that yet in this presentation.
Correct.
today, so.
One
So-
other question, maybe you'll be addressing this later, but for these shortened days, are we providing after-school care?
So Fun and Friends, so before and after school care will run as normal.
Okay.
You know, and I can tell you, in education, we're very decades of adaptive, parents running a little bit late, things like that. Those systems have always been in place. But our before and after school wraparound care will still be available.
So the parent that is going to work and their kids are going for a shorter day, they'll still have care for their child after.
They can elect into that care, just
They
like they've
can.
always been able to. Free
And
childcare will not be available when we are providing in-person learning options for all of our children,
Right.
school-age children, I should say.
And we're available to handle more children, because I'm guessing we might have more.
I think, you
Families.
know, when this plan finally got unanimously agreed upon, I think at the end of yesterday with all the people involved, Corey was probably the whitest in the room. But yes, they feel okay. We typically have about 500 families during the year. Right now, we've seen a decrease in that. Many of our families are home, are working from home, so we haven't had the typical numbers we've had. So we anticipate when they start to climb back a little bit, we will. We have a beautiful new Baxter's. We have additional locations for Fun and Friends that can take place. So we're confident. Again, at times, all these minutiaes of that, because it is going to mean bringing in staff earlier. So there's expenses on that community ed side that we have to address as well.
How about Jim?
That might be a minutia detail we can't get to quite yet. The guidance that they're giving us is kids need to move, but they're saying kids need to move outside. A lot of the guidance is get them outside as much as possible. We're hardy Minnesotans, so I think we can get them out even in the coldest of most days. Having our elementary staff present, they also know that they have great colleagues in Fayette and Health, so they're having to be contained in the classroom. There's things they can do as well. But right now, the guidance is if they're running, they can run around in the gym. The guidance is still letting them touch playground equipment. That's changed. Before, when it came out in the spring, it was we weren't supposed to touch anything. But that outside air that we can get our kids, same thing on a bus. If it's nice out, open every window. Let the kids sit by the window. All those things for that open air. So our goal is to create every opportunity for that for our kids. Just may look a little different than what they're used to.
Okay, getting into the minutia, but just one thought I had when you were going through the hybrid model for the older kids, and it's Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday, Friday, and then Wednesday is all distance, right?
Yep.
Okay, the first week of school, I think we start on a Tuesday. You might want to switch that around just so all kids get in on Tuesday and Wednesday.
We might have to look at that. Honestly, Ruth, that's a great,
It
that
is
did
a
not
good
come up
point.
in our hours of discussion. The other thing, just to make clarify, we will assign families by alphabet, but we'll also cross-reference to ensure they're assigned to a guardian. We have many students living in the same household that don't have the same last name. So we'll do a cross-reference, but that's how we're gonna get to the 50%. Is really, and we're gonna ensure that families are traveling together and that families have their children coming to school on the same day. We are really looking at, John and Andrea are in a great task right now of how that divides out, when you're looking at 2,000 students apiece.
So you, Lynn, you mentioned that there's an enrollment form you're going to walk us through, but is there more presentation?
Yep.
Just a little bit more.
Just a little bit more.
Well, no, I think the questions are great because obviously there's more questions. I was just wondering if there's.
Thank you for keeping us on task. Brainerd Learning Center and our Lincoln Education Center allow us to have some unique options. Those are specialized programs, so they are already running basically within that 50% capacity guidance. And also because of their classrooms, they're able to follow strict social distancing guidelines. So in their hybrid model, they're gonna look pretty typical to what they look like now, minus the shortened day. So Lincoln Education Center, they're gonna keep their students within the same classrooms, so self-contained classrooms. They used to allow some crossing and things like that. They're gonna keep them within there. Brainerd Learning Center, they have mid-level and the academies. Those will follow a similar schedule. If I'm an 11th and 12th grader that's doing some of my more credit recovery and things like that, that happens at all different times of the day anyway. They've already kind of been running hybrid models to the alternative education. So our students in those programs should feel a lot of similarity to what they're already doing. And again, we consider these one of our more at-risk or higher need students will have them in. The other high-risk population that we haven't, we'll get to early childhood, then I'll jump to the other one.
Do you want Lincoln again, or?
Nope, Lincoln's up there.
Okay.
Early childhood, again, because of the uniqueness of it, there are not a lot of kids in regular sized classrooms. So they'll be able to provide that hybrid model that feels very similar. Very unique are birth to 3. We have staff that are going into people's homes. They will not be able to go into people's homes. So for those home visits, they will offer the visit to come on site, or they will conduct that home visit virtually, but they're still gonna be able to have that contact. 3 to 5-year-olds, they're gonna have their standard schedule in special education, again, because of what we can do with that space. Pre-K and voluntary pre-K and wraparound childcare. They'll have a shortened schedule that's chosen by the families, but they'll still be able to access that. So in the early childhood world, just like elementary, it's gonna feel very similar to what they've been doing, minus a shortened day in some instances. Our family education, again, very similar, although they've been able to run like this class for birth, this class for 1-year-olds. Tani explained that more than likely they'll have to do some combined age classrooms just because of size of classes, and they anticipate lower numbers coming in. Okay. The high needs populations that we didn't put there, when you look at our students that have cognitive and developmental disabilities, when you look at our students that are in some real high structured autism support classrooms, we call those federal setting 3 or level 3 classrooms. Doesn't matter the grade level. We would like to have our level 3 classes all day, every day, running at every grade level, elementary, middle school, high school. Again, high needs learners that are needing that special attention and care. So the recommendation we're bringing forth to you is that we start the school year in a hybrid learning model for all students. Go ahead, these are the reasons why we'd like to make this recommendation.
First, this is the safest model for both staff and students. It allows consistent contact for all students and permits more in-person learning for our youngest and most at-risk learners, as we've already outlined. It also aligns with the science-based formula and current direction of our local the guidance of our local public health officials. Right now, the infection rate in the county is growing very quickly. 2 weeks ago, we were on, was it 2.2, and now we're at 7.1 or 7.2. That trend line is accelerating. So we need to anticipate that we're probably going to be in a hybrid learning manner by virtue of the infection rate. So let's be prepared for it. It's also the safest way for us to proceed. So that's what we're trying to do, and it allows us, as we said, to bring kids in at certain levels and give them contact with social distancing. It incorporates recommendations from students, from parents, from teachers, support staff, administration, and union leadership that allows for flexibility for the myriad of learning adaptations that teachers and students will be required to do this year due to COVID-19. So that's the reason we wish to start in the hybrid model right out of the gate. The next thing is we want to use a shortened schedule for the hybrid and for the distance models. It limits the contact time and adds to the safety for staff and students. It also allows time to support the dual responsibilities for teachers and support staff to provide the in-person and digital learning that requires extra time. It allows for classrooms, buses, and other facilities to be cleaned more thoroughly. The deep cleaning that needs to come requires that we move the bodies out at times to make room for that. It also fosters collaboration, which is essential to provide a standards-based, guaranteed, and viable curriculum, a phrase you've heard from me for many years. So our next steps. From this presentation, our next steps is to inform the educational staff of the return to school plan. We need to make sure that all the units know what their plans are concretely so that they can make informed decisions about what they're going to need for themselves and their families. We need to finalize the plans we're bringing forward to you by Monday, August 10th. So questions that you have today, we welcome to help refine any plans that we need to do. We need to send out the family enrollment form with a due date of August 14th because we need to get the information back so that we can do all the planning, the rostering, the scheduling, the routing that goes into the start of school. We need to create student classes and cohorts based on student and staff data. So once staff know what the plans are, they understand then what kind of requests they make to have. They have some reflection to do, and do I feel safe? Do I fall in the exempted category or not? That affects how we identify who teaches what, whether they're working from home with distance student or whether they're back in the classroom. And then we also need to communicate with families what it means for their children. What does the instruction look like? What will the day look like? What will transportation look like? This brings us back to the enrollment form. In terms of the enrollment form, it's not just a question of asking whether or not, we're not getting the enrollment form at the moment, are we? That's not the right link. Okay, sorry, I've got the wrong link in there. So let me talk you through the form for just a moment. The enrollment form is asking a series of questions. Not only do we need to know whether or not the family is going to participate in distance learning for the entire academic term with the right to choose again at the end of the academic term. We can't have the families changing week by week or day by day, whether in distance learning or they're in hybrid. We could not manage the organization of that. Some school districts have gone to year-wide placement. If you choose DL, you're going DL for the year. That's not Brainerd. We will re-roster at every change of term. So if you're in the elementaries and you're on trimesters, at the trimester, if you're a DL, you can choose to come back.
So
Or if you
DL
work-
is distance learning, so.
Yep, sorry,
yeah.
DL.
Oh, it's every quarter then, or basically
Every academic term, because we have both trimesters and semesters in the district, depending on what level you're at. That's why I'm using the phrase every term.
Okay, so that'll be like, when is the first one end?
First trimester ends in the beginning of November,
Okay, got it. Thank
okay?
you.
It's usually 12 weeks from the start, the 12-week term. All right, I'm probably not doing that math right in my head, but 12 weeks.
Semesters towards the 20th of January.
Yeah, mid-January.
Depends on your level.
So they'll have the ability to change. Hopefully, people are changing to come back to us because we do believe that we can provide a safe environment for students to learn, and we believe that our instruction is absolutely best when it's our teachers, our kids, and our buildings. So that form is trying to gather that information. Is that what you need? We also need to know whether or not you're going to need transportation. We're asking families to, if you can drop off and pick up your student, please drop off and pick up your student. That will take some pressure off the 50% spacing rules on transportation. So we need to know whether you need transportation.
Tim, do you remember what the number was on the survey? It was significant.
About 55% of our families said that they
said
are gonna
that they
choose
would
to pick up
not-
and drop off.
Yep, they would choose the drop-off. So-
Correct.
And what was the percent in previous years?
We could grab number, but our ridership is about 5,400 students. We have very high ridership.
Okay.
So when you look at that, and now you
Sounds
say
good.
55%, we're anticipating, but again, until we know, the unique thing about this district is when you put up our district map, we anticipate there might be a cluster in this area that's gonna need transportation that we can't accommodate 50%. So again, it's rerouting, and that's when I talk about giving a hard and fast start time is really gonna depend on, once we start to see that, we'll be able to give it, knowing that some of our students may be coming in early, some of our students may be a few minutes behind that as we adapt to that model.
Question on the enrollment form and the timeline, so are we gonna send that out electronically and not gonna be known till the 10th, and then they only have 4 days to respond?
Here's what's interesting, families are waiting. I mean, if you'd like to volunteer to answer phones in the Welcome Center, and 5 minutes after Governor Walz started to speak, our phones started to ring. So our families are waiting. Something that's used, like There are a lot of districts, the announcement went out, they made parents choose 2 days later. So I think they're expecting to have to make this. The sooner we can get the information, there'll be multiple formats. You know, Superintendent Larson has drafted communication that'll have that embedded link. We can do our Sky Alerts, we'll have it on our webpage. We want, and parents may get annoyed, but they're probably gonna receive 2 or 3 phone calls during this first week to say, have you completed your enrollment form to prepare for the 2021 school year?
The final piece of information we want to collect off the enrollment form is whether or not you need free meal and meal delivery on days during hybrid learning. Okay, so that, again, that's all for planning purposes. We want to make sure that we've got it dialed in, what services we're providing, to whom they're being provided, and how to best provide them in an efficient and appropriate manner. So we're going to ask for all that information on that one form. There's also going to be a caveat on this form. Because we are engaging in distance learning that could involve teachers being live on the screen with their students while the student is at home, we want to clarify that at no time should a teacher be videoed or recorded and then have that recording posted on social media. It would be a violation of FERPA. So we want to make clear that for the protection and dignity of our staff, that their work as professionals working with children is honored in the hybrid and distance learning formats.
As well for the students in the classroom.
There's also a privacy issue for the students in the classroom too. Other students are on camera as well. So we need to respect their privacy and their dignity as well. That information will be included in the form so parents understand that when they're making their choices.
And here's what we can assure you as the board. Because when we've looked at all this input from our students, from our families, from our staff, from every unit of that staff and union leadership, there is agreement that this is the best way, the safest way to bring our students back to school, to ensure that we're having daily contact with our school, to maximize in-person learning the best that we can. It's also giving us the ability, and that's what's taken a tremendous amount of work, is to align in-person, hybrid, and distance as closely as possible. Again, so whenever we have to switch, it should not be something of a significant change for a child or a family to feel. And in doing that, that's why, given the data and all the input, we want to start in that hybrid model, and we're recommending as the educational leadership team of Brainerd Public Schools, this is where we start, so we can ensure the safety of our students and staff.
Can I ask a question on, and maybe you're gonna get to this on the PPE part of it, or who's gonna be the mask police, and who's gonna clean, and who's?
So when we talk about that the return to school safe plan, that's under construction right now, those are all very specific questions that are answered in there. Children under age of 5, the face masks aren't required, but above that, they're required. And we have some flexibility with face shields. That's one of the biggest concerns that's coming from staff. Who's gonna police that? Honestly, we have clerical staff right now. They ask, what's your purpose for entering the building? Their next question they wanna know is, should we be giving a script about that? That's the minutia of the details that we have to really delve into to make sure we have it clearly articulated and identified in that plan. That's a plan that I think we set the date of like the 24th, Lane?
24th.
24th,
It'll be
where we will.
finalized by the 24th.
Yep,
The district is going to be identifying a COVID coordinator who will be responsible for overseeing a lot of the procedures and protocols around health.
And how are we gonna get all this deep cleaning done? Are we gonna have,
so, it's interesting, and that's where, Reed is underneath that, in the midst of that work.
okay,
Through all of this, there's quite a bit different cleaning products. There's gonna be requirements upon all of us. I mean, every single staff member that's in the building, this isn't just gonna fall to custodial. Custodial is gonna be doing the deep clean, and that's the time of when you look at massive buildings like Forest View and the high school, there's gonna be some things that need to happen. But that day-to-day, it's gonna be all of us involved in that, and we'll go under the direction. But through this, there's very interesting, I've heard of chemicals you spray on gym floors that can last up to 30 days and things like that, but there's high demand for all of those. So Marcy and Reed and Jeff have really been testing and looking at different PPE equipment. You know, now we have 26,000 masks thanks to a donation in stock. We have face shields on order. The governor's guaranteed every certified staff member gets a face shield, every certified staff member gets a mask, every student's getting a mask. We're gonna work with our regional center, which is Sourcewell, to get those all distributed in place. Those are all the ball's coming super fast at us, so we're gonna continue to detail on that plan to make sure we communicate that clearly to our community and our families and our parents. But we don't have all the answers quite yet.
Again, we got this on July 10th, or excuse me, July 30th. And so I look at this, and all of this has been finalized and worked on since that time a week ago. And so it's pretty amazing. And so there are fine details, and even the document that we're putting together that we have to publish, that thing is really looking beautiful right now, but it is in real draft form. And there's still, once we get the enrollment form completed for every single student, we're going to know how many kids are going to be distance learning, and we're going to know how many kids are going to be with us every single day. We're going to know how many want bus transportation and how many are going to be dropped off and picked up each day. Even the pickup drop-off is going to be probably long lines again, and we just have to expect that because this is something we weren't, you know. The internet, we've got that, we're trying to get that all figured out on this enrollment form to make sure that all of our kids have access when we have to shift from one model to the next. And honestly, I think these models, they are so in sync with one another that every Thursday when we get the information, so we can see what the past 14 days of information is, then we can make that decision on a Thursday and it'll be implemented the following Monday. And so we'll watch it every Thursday, make the decision on what it's going to look like for the next week. And we feel like we can go back and forth in a flawless as absolutely possible manner because of the timing and the synchronous. That was a new word for me today. So synchronous planning that he did. I told him he had to define it.
Yeah, and that switching to different things, if we're switching because our numbers are down, is not as big of a problem as if we're switching to all distance with
Correct.
parents, so.
And that, honestly, that's the phone calls that I've taken from parents, Ruth.
Yep.
That was their fear.
Yeah,
Their fear is, we have to plan for our families.
yeah,
We have to plan for our children. I spoke to a mom that has a child in 3 different levels in this district, and she just said, please be cognizant of whatever you do. She's like, we will support whatever you do, but make it consistent.
Yeah.
And so that's the thing of that data too. We'll be very cognizant of, you know, that's what our public health officials are saying. If we were opening today, we would be in person.
yeah.
But they would also be cautioning us, if you just compare yourself in the last 2 weeks, more than likely you could start and shut yourself right back down. And that's very difficult for our families. That was very much wrestled with because all of us want in person, all day, every day, like life used to be. I will never take it for granted again. Ever, 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 ever. Our teachers are craving it. Our kids are craving it. I've sat with parents as they've cried. I watched kids this last spring as they turned in their equipment, and the minute the window went down and they got to see a teacher, they were in tears because they finally got to see him. That's why we do this business. This isn't what we're hoping for. But I really think we're doing the best. And to me, this plan that we're recommending through arguments with one another,
Yep.
and our staff, we really feel it's prioritizing the safety and security of our staff and our students. It's providing high-quality instruction. It's preserving relationships. It's taking into account their mental health. It's taking into account all the variations of the learning needs of our kids, from birth to 21, from AP student to special ed student. We're putting it in there. And I've been reading lots of other people's plans, and I'm going to run around this block when we're all done and say we got the best one. So,
So with this in mind, then, unless there's more to present, first of all, thanks for the whole team. Incredible work since July 30th which was only a handful of days ago, and essentially we've got to kind of figure it out for ourselves. But I would like to open it up to dialogue, more questions. And I know I've got a half a dozen questions myself, but let's open it up for additional questions so we get clarity.
I had a question on, so what if the case level went to a point that we're supposed to be all online learning? Is that an automatic thing, or do we have to take board action or something, or would it happen the next week, or?
So
At Monday's board meeting, I'm going to ask the board to pass a resolution that will say that we will begin on, and I'm going to recommend the hybrid as a, because, and I can explain why I think that that's the best one to start, but I think they did a really nice job on it. But what that resolution does is it says that we can look at it, we can follow this data that we get, and we get the information on Thursdays, and we can decide and move accordingly throughout the year based on the cases that are in our county and the recommendation from the county nurses and such, moving forward. So that we don't have, every time we want to change, we don't have to have a board meeting to ask people to do that. And so districts and school boards throughout the state of Minnesota are being asked to pass this resolution that will start on this model and then we'll adjust according to what the numbers are. And so I'll be bringing that resolution forward to the board on Monday.
I think just to further that discussion, it's my understanding the guidelines, you know, the 0 to 9 and 10 to 19, you know, those are guidelines. So as you think about the resolution, what you bring forward, I personally wouldn't anticipate that on Thursday we get some new data and Monday we change. Maybe it's 30 days later or a period of time later. So I would suggest thinking about that.
We have talked about just that because we don't want to jump too quick either or
Yeah,
too fast
yeah.
one way or the other. And if you're on a borderline thing, it might be better just to stay where we're at. Or if it's something a lot different, it might be worth changing it. But yeah, we're not going to just jump. We're
Yeah.
going to make really smart decisions as we make those changes.
Yeah.
We're cognizant that families can't turn on a dime either.
Right.
So whatever plans we implement, we have to give them the opportunity to plan to change and plan to stay in the change. So safety is our number one concern, so we might be quicker to become more restrictive than we would be to loosen up. But you know, whatever we do, we'd be cognizant of the impact of change and the rate of change and the frequency of change.
Have we already, do we already know our staff, how many are at risk and want to not be in person?
So Angie and Travis are working very diligently on that. We started communicating with staff 3 weeks ago. CDC guidelines and Department of Health guidelines are, the list that was in the spring has definitely narrowed based on what they're learning and they continue to learn. That was communicated out to all staff in every unit about 3 weeks ago, what those guidelines were, and if they were having a concern, an accommodation process that they could start to go through. A lot of our staff are waiting to see what this is. They want to make an educated decision based on what our plans are and how those plans are going to look. We've also had discussion with the union too, based on, we may have some staff who would even volunteer. Well, we're going to prioritize our most vulnerable first to support that distance learning, and then we may need to look from there. But again, until we have that hard data about students. But there is a process for our staff. We don't know the exact numbers
Okay.
at this point.
Have
Because
any of
that'll
them
make a
been
difference,
exposed,
too.
or-
It's a huge difference.
Some of, I mean, you know, if you think about a staff member who's going through chemo treatment, that puts you on a very high-risk category.
Yeah.
You know, you're strongly being encouraged, you know, those are staff that are vulnerable. We need to accommodate for them. That's the law, and we will look to do that. Angie is diligently working on that. And staff have started to communicate with her. We could look at the list from the spring. We've already been in communication. A lot of those staff members have been reached out to in all units. We'll look through, and the rules regarding leave and the leave you can access has also changed from what was first released in the spring.
And it does say too, if there's a vulnerable person in the household, that we need to be ready to accommodate that as well. And so, Angie, like you said, Angie and Travis are on top of this, and a lot of our staff are waiting to see what we decide. And they'll make that decision, and then that'll give us more data to work from as well.
And that's a fear throughout the state, is being able to staff. we need to.
And for busing too, I
And
would
for
guess.
busing, I mean, it's, any of those
And
businesses.
food.
And
Food,
food.
yeah, what's the guidelines on food service?
So again, until we have that hard data, we're not gonna be able to match everything up. And so those are some of the limitations that we're very cognizant of. This is what we'd like to do. We're gonna do our best to do it. Finding substitute teachers, that's also gonna be extremely difficult.
So I've got a two-part question with the shorter days. The shorter days and then the Fridays, and I understand, well, I don't understand. I don't even want to pretend to understand what it's like to be a teacher and trying to do the combination. But can you just clarify for me again, what's the purpose of the shorter day? Why are we eliminating that last hour and a half? And then what kind of discussion was had with the Fridays? I think the back-to-back in classroom days, like the Monday, Tuesday, and then the Wednesday, Thursday, I could see that bringing a lot of value, but I was just wondering about the Friday piece, what kind of discussion was had with maybe an alternating schedule that Group A is 3 days a week and they alternate so that they're 3 days every other week.
So where this discussion originated from was really looking at our elementary. So when we're prioritizing elementary and when we have to move to a hybrid model, having them in every day. What that means though is I restrict, okay? I, the teacher, am now with them every day. I'm eating lunch with them. I'm moving them to recess or activities. I'm not getting a duty-free lunch. I'm not getting my prep time. And in addition to that, besides my instruction teaching time, I still have a whole group of students that have maybe potentially elected or because of illness are going out in distance learning. So really to accommodate all those things, that's where the discussion started. If we're gonna ask a teacher to now give up those things and be with a student the full 5 hours direct instruction, we still have to honor their time to plan, their time to prep, their time to collaborate with their peers, their time to have their professional learning communities. So that was the first discussion of the shortened day. How it implemented into the AB model, and it's Wednesday, so it'll be a middle of the week, not a Friday. With that, if you're gonna have a shortened day on one end, you look at what does it start to do at the next level, because we're a system. So from early childhood, because early childhood busing is another whole wrench that gets put in here, because they're running midday routes on that. Again, it was the same thing of, how do we allow that crosswalk pathing as a teacher's gonna have to do, distance learning and in-person instruction, as well as then providing that extra time for the collaboration. That kind of off day in the middle is the consistency piece, because otherwise I'd be bringing kids 2 days. So if I'd go Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday for one, then Thursday, Friday, then the next week you can alternate. We've had all those discussions.
If I could so let me just try to understand. So as a teacher, and my students come in Monday, Tuesday, and then my same students won't be in Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, so I'll be doing the distance learning.
Correct.
So my class, Mr. Murtha's 10th grade English class, has A students and B students in it. And the A students will be in person with me Monday and Tuesday, and the B students will be logging in to join the class remotely or be doing work that I've assigned to them and I've contacted with them about. So that'd be Monday, Tuesday. On Wednesday, everyone would be in distance learning. On Thursday and Friday, my B students would be in class with me, and my A students would be joining remotely, doing whatever work is appropriate based on the learning target that's in play. So I've got A and B in my class. The class is continuing forward. We're not dividing the instruction in half. So I'm not teaching the same thing Monday, Tuesday, and then repeating it Thursday, Friday.
So maybe we're practicing distance learning right now through our
Correct.
dialogue here, but.
The fact that all the principals are down in 200 watching and learning a little bit right now, that would be an
Yeah.
example of that
Well,
exact
let me just,
case.
so I'm a third grade teacher. Monday, Tuesday, I've got my students with me.
So elementary, they're there all the time. So
Yeah.
you're talking, it would be 6th through 12th grade.
Well, no, just focus on elementary for now, K through 5.
Really K through
5.
5, yeah, okay, yeah.
They're with me Monday, Tuesday, right?
They're with me Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. They're
Live.
with me all the time, just on a
Elementary
shortened
is
day.
there every day.
The difference is for that teacher now, right? If you look at systems and we have specialists and we have
Yeah,
rotation.
hang on a
Oh,
second
sorry.
though. But I thought that I thought the distance, what's being recommended is that they come 2 days a week. But you're saying elementary will be there every day of the week?
Early childhood through 5th grade, every day of the week.
Oh, okay, I
When we
missed
get to
that.
6th through 12th, we start that AABB model.
Okay.
It allows it to overlap. The question for that shortened day really becomes now when I've had to make my small groups, and again, kids aren't supposed to, they're gonna be, meals are coming to rooms. The teacher is there all the time. They're not getting to prep, they're not getting a lunch break. So when you look at all those things that we need to allow that teacher to do, as well as crosswalking instruction, that's why we shorten the day to align that.
Okay, so just to clarify, the K through 5, the recommendation is going to be every day.
Correct.
It's not a hybrid.
It is a hybrid, but the
Hybrid.
hybrid model that we're proposing is every day. It's just a shortened day, so it's squished together a little bit. And remember, what's nice about the hybrid in the elementary is that we're having more social distancing, smaller groups and things. So like my class, let's say I'm a second grade teacher, I might have 30 kids in my class. And I can't have that many in my classroom. Well, maybe 15 of my kids have to go to another space with another teacher. And we kind of work together as teachers, that teacher and me, that we're getting the same information to our children. And so not only does the letting people, having the shortened day allow for prep time and those kinds of things, it also allows for great collaboration time between those teachers to make sure that they're meeting the needs of all their children. Even at grade levels, they all have the same time where they can meet and say, I have a great lesson for this math lesson, let me show you how to do it, or whatever they can do that, along with meeting the distance learning needs of their kids who might have broken a leg, or maybe came down with COVID and has to be home for 14 days, and doing the distance work with that group of kids. And so it's really important to get
How do we
that
have enough teachers in the elementary to do that?
So here's again, this is where it gets the minutia of it, right? So I'm gonna wave at Jody Kennedy. So Jody Kennedy has a kindergarten classroom right now that at half capacity would hold 32 children. So that's just the space that's been created, right? And capacity, when I say that, is the fire marshal gardens. More than likely, 50% capacity, and with strict social distancing guidelines, that kindergarten teacher is gonna be able to have all of her kids right there. Right, and that's can be considered, because the hybrid requirements are 50% capacity and strict social distancing guidelines. Now, if I'm Todd Sauer and I'm in Lowell, and if you've been in some of those tiny classrooms in Lowell, when I get to 50% capacity and I have to do strict social distancing guidelines, I might not be able to keep that same cohort of kids together, which means that's where we would peel off. So the hybrid part becomes, we created learning cohorts, so I might create another section of that. Okay, and when you say teacher, we have title teachers, we have some other staff that we would try to create a learning cohort or cohorts where that instruction can occur, still allowing that child to come into the building every day. So it's gonna feel the same except for that shortened day, but that's how we got creative with the hybrid piece. Meet the capacity, occupancy guidelines, strict social guidelines, distancing. The other thing we don't know is, as we look at our section numbers right now, we're assuming every single child is coming in person. We know they're not. So we start to watch those. You know, Molly right now, because of her space and everything else, she could do it with everybody that's currently enrolled, with the addition of one person to create those sections. So that's the minutia of the things we have to figure out. But our goal was youngest learners in person as much as possible.
So can you put back the one screen that kind of had the recommendations? But so I guess I just didn't catch that, but the recommendation is K through 5 will be in school Monday through Friday with a slightly shortened time frame. Okay, all right, thank you for that.
So what will my 4th grade son, what will our day look like? My wife and I usually drop them off, our children off. But what time would we expect to drop him off in 4th grade? And what time generally would we pick him up?
So again, if we would just go with what we've seen when we used to do early out several years back,
Mhm.
still a normal drop-off.
Okay.
And probably an end of the day, you know, we were usually starting like 1:45-ish. So sometimes it's ranged from 1:25 to 1:45. Again, it's just depending. We can't give that hard, fast answer until we start to run those routes.
Well, that's helpful, what you said about this.
But we're anticipating normal drop-off.
Mhm.
You know, the hard part is some of our students requiring transportation. They may not make it right on that bill because of the routes we're having to run. Our families that can pick up and drop off, except if you're waiting in a carpool line.
Okay.
Those are the minutia pieces we have to continue to play out, and I'm anticipating we'll have to talk about, we joked about the forest view circle of death.
Mhm.
You know, if we're gonna have that many people picking up and dropping off, we're gonna have to come up with traffic patterns and creative ways of getting kids into different entrances and making sure it's safe. There's just pieces we haven't even gotten to, but that's what I would anticipate.
Great, thank you.
But there's also fun and friends if, right.
Correct,
So a
that
lot
is-
more, that's why I'm thinking more parents might opt for that because of the earlier drop-off.
Well, and if I go the couple days and the pickup drop-off's a nightmare, you know, but no, our before and after wraparound services will still be in place.
How about in the hallways with all the kids at once? How do we keep them distant?
So again, when you look at the guideline in the elementary, when we go to hybrid, it's really restricting their movements. So there's clear guidance on social distancing markers, traffic patterns, things like that. But again, now I've assigned a teacher. Normally she could just let the kids go down the hallway, or if you're at Forest View, 500 kids used to come into the cafeteria once. Can't happen. There's a lot more adult supervision that's gonna be placed on our certified staff and our support staff that necessarily hasn't been able, we haven't had to worry about before. Now we do. And that's one of the clear guidelines. We're gonna have to watch that. Where kids congregate, locker rooms, I'm assuming
Restrooms?
not one drinking fountain's gonna be turned on. You know, food service has very strict guidelines, that's on the plan.
So what happens if a professional staff member doesn't want to wear a face mask or a face shield? Then what?
It would not be an option. It is grounds of employment. As long as that is the recommendation from the Minnesota Department of Health, it's a non-negotiable.
So I won't have to worry about my son sitting in a class with an instructor that doesn't have a.
And there are instructors who may have exemptions because of their own health, that a mask might exacerbate that, but we would require medical proof of that from the doctor, like we would any medical accommodation for work.
So
And
even
then
in a situation.
they'd be provided a face
And then
shield.
you provide them with a face shield.
So they'll have a face shield or a face mask.
Yeah.
And some staff have, they're desiring both.
Yeah.
And we're making accommodations, we have kids who need speech. Our elementary staff are very cognizant. Facial expressions are extremely important. I mean, for all of our learners, but our littlest learners.
Yeah.
You know, so those are staff that are saying, can we please have, our interpreters are a hoot. They actually got masks. They brought in one the other day. that-
Plastic.
but it was the one she got was kind of steamed, so they're still researching and finding things out.
Still practicing.
You watch our little, I mean, we've worried about what kids would do with masks. I don't know if you walk in this building at all. It's like nothing to our children around here. I watched the whole group of them coming again from Fun and Friends, and they're.
Yeah,
I
I
thought
noticed
they'd
when
be
I'm out
tugging
and
and
about
pulling
that.
and things.
I'm
They're-
surprised at how well
I
kids.
was surprised.
Kids are
I mean,
doing
so that's what
great.
we've gone to observe. And you look, we're much more difficult as adults than they are as children. And we're taking consideration, we have some students with extreme special needs. Our staff are gonna require additional PPE, from gowns to boots to gloves to, and we're getting those guidelines, very clear guidelines coming out from the Department of Health, and advisement happening with our special educators.
So still trying to get some clarity on, if we could, on the middle school now, I didn't quite understand how the space, I love the idea that fifth grade will be the same as K through 4 every day, but I'm not quite understanding the space, how we freed up space at Forest View.
With grades 6 and 8 going in the hybrid model to the AABB schedule. That means in Forest View in total, half of the sixth through 8th grade students are in distance learning at any given time, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday.
But aren't you having to split the numbers up then, or no? The classrooms are large enough that the full class, for the most part, can be in their classrooms.
Again, are you talking fifth grade, or are you talking this?
Sixth, seventh, and eighth, yeah.
So again, that's how, when we split by alphabet, or how we're gonna do that with rostering, and that's again, once we figure out and we do alphabet, this is where John and Andrea have a little angst of, but again, the classrooms it's one of our newest it was one of our newest buildings. Spaces are large enough, social distancing can occur, that we can get them in there. Why we can bring in fifth grade, John has a plan, I mean, cafeteria is gonna become classroom space.
Okay, all right, and then, so now now I'm no longer a third grade teacher, I'm a sixth grade teacher, and my students will be in Monday and Tuesday.
Half of them will be Monday and Tuesday. You'll have all your students every day, Monday, Tuesday. You'll have all your students every day. On Monday, Tuesday, half of them will be in person, half of them will be digital. Wednesday, everyone is digital. Thursday, Friday, the other half is in person, and the first half is then digital. So Mr. Murtha's sixth grade English class will have 35 kids in it. Hopefully not, 35 kids. 17 of them will be in person, 18 of them would be joining remotely Monday and Tuesday. Wednesday, everyone's remote. Thursday and Friday, it's the opposite groups. So the learning, the purpose here is to keep the learning continuing. What we can't do is divide the number of standards we're obligated to fulfill in half and then just teach standards 1 and 2 on Monday and Tuesday, and then repeat standard 1 and 2 on Thursday and Friday. We'll never get our kids to grow a full year if we give them half of the curriculum. So we need to modify how we instruct to keep on track to do a full year's worth of work for them. So that means they need to be with their teacher every day. They just can't be physically in the room with them every day. And the teacher needs extra time and resources to prepare for the fact that she's got a more dynamic instructional environment to work in. It's very easy for me to do eye contact and get a sense of which kid knows what's going on and which kid is not self-advocating but needs help. That's very difficult online. So I may need to prepare different activities and lesson for that student that fulfills the same learning target. That's the need for the shortened schedule right there.
Okay, good.
So on that Wednesday, all kids are gonna be in
Distance
school,
learning.
distance learning.
Except for
I mean,
K
yeah,
through 4.
they're gonna be
K
in
through
class
5,
is
sorry.
what I meant.
6 through 12 would all be in distance learning on Wednesday.
Okay, so the teacher will have the same schedule, that same 5-hour schedule.
Correct.
So why aren't we doing what Tom suggested of having, I don't get why we wouldn't have half of them in that day and switch it off every other day.
You're asking the parents to plan a more complex home life for some students in terms of transportation, if they're doing that. You're asking, if you bring them physically in, we're making the cleaning a little bit more challenging. It's not a no, Tommy. It's an understandable request because we do want people in with us. There are some implications for how we clean buildings at that point.
So if we start out this way, if we decide that we could get the cleaning done correctly and parents would rather have their kids every other Wednesday, we could modify over time.
Well,
Potentially.
yeah,
Potentially.
and I guess, my thinking behind it is that, what we've heard, and it totally makes sense. It's a lot easier, a lot better, a lot more successful for our families, our teachers, to have students in, and to some degree less work. So it just seems like, well, why would we just have one day that it's completely vacant? Why we wouldn't take advantage of having the kids back in? Because as a teacher, it's one less day I have to do online learning. I've got my contact. It just seems like that might be.
So, again, when you look at the halvesies, right, so if we have to split them in half.
Yeah.
So when we talk about complexity of schedule, so if I'm the sophomore at Brainerd High School, this week I go Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Next week now I go only Monday, Tuesday. The next week I go Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. The next week I only go. So we've heard from families that make it consistent, Don't try to interchange that. We're hearing from staff. Again, our staff are having to crosswalk these complexities of that. They have asked, and on Wednesdays we do for our professional learning community. So when you look for things that are contractual obligations to our staff too, and the things that our staff need to provide that instruction, they are asking for that additional support and planning time, particularly at the second level, due to the complexity of courses that are being offered and the range of courses that are having to be offered. They are having multiple contact. They're unlike an elementary teacher who's typically dealing with the same 25 students. When I move into a secondary level, I'm dealing with 150 to 175 students. And so that becomes the pattern of it. And so when we worked with our union leadership, they made it very clear that we are going to need this. And if you look at other models that are happening around the state, probably the one that we're most clear to or aligned with is Pequot. But districts our size, most of their in-person learning is 1 or 2 days a week, period. They're not even trying to do more than that. If I'm Anoka Hennepin, I'm bringing you on every kid on site twice. And
But
that's-
aren't we, you know, we're saying our preference is to have inline learning or in classroom learning. So I guess I'm not understanding why we want to encourage and move in that direction. Always try to push, if anything, the limit of having in classroom versus, well, you know, we've got more cleaning we have to do, those kind of things, because it's offset by the challenges of the distance. So it just seems like we even by the executive orders, it allows us to have the students in, and so, and I don't know from a complexity that it's, you know, as a family, if I've got middle school as an example, children, and I know that my student is in class every Monday and Tuesday, and every other Wednesday. It's
The wrench in that also is transportation. Now I'm asking multiple routes to be created, because on this week I transport these kids Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, but in the next week I have to switch that transportation model. And again, in a system this large that's covering this many square miles, that is a huge, significant.
Well, it
you're
would
gonna-
just be the same transportation model as the Monday, Tuesday, or the Thursday, Friday.
No, it wouldn't be.
I guess, you know, I'm not necessarily asking for all the reasons why we can't. I would
Get that.
ask more of what do we need to do to take advantage of the opportunity to have our students in the classroom more, because there's,
We can explore those options. One of the things we talked about at elementary, like if we really wanted, originally our target was to have a full day schedule, but if we have to split them and create additional sections, so the first figure that was thrown out, because I asked all the administrative team, if you're gonna keep your elementary schedule the same, but we have to follow these capacity, how many more staff do you need? The answer to that question was 25. Okay, so originally our thought was, this is where our brain went in planning. Okay, well, if you need 25, we have paras that in there, a lot of them know curriculum, we can provide some academic support. So if I have to push middle school into hybrid or even distance, I could start to grab some of that support staff and bring them back to the elementary. Okay, so if you want to start talking, we looked at budget indications. If I would start to do that just to bring a pair in for academic support, that's a minimum of 120,000. If I would like a certified teacher in front of them, that's about 1.7 million. You had 25 more staff on that. So there's some budgetary issues with that. You know, when we really discussed why the AABB model and that transportation, it does become rerouting, because right now I'm routing A through M, let's say Monday, Tuesday, and on Thursday then I'm doing O through Z. Right? But now all of a sudden on this Wednesday I'm going to do A through M, but next Wednesday I'm going to do O through P. On top of I still have all the elementary going and have early childhood going. So it's starting to throw another pattern into that. So, I mean, this is again the feedback we've received from the staff who are going to be required to provide the learning. We get that. The other thing you talked about, well, let's bring in A in the morning and let's bring in B in the afternoon. We'll just give them half days. Well, now we've cross-contaminated, right? We're really supposed to provide, when we're bringing in different cohorts of students, we're really supposed to allow distance between those students coming into those spaces. Those were all part of the discussion. It's something we can definitely
Well,
bring
morning,
back.
afternoon schedule is transportation-wise impossible
Yeah.
to do. On any given day, we run X number of miles in transportation. So the box is anything that's less than or equal to X. So if we try to do half-day morning, half-day afternoon, you're really trying to run 2x. You're trying to run twice as many
Yeah,
miles.
but
of
we're not,
Okay.
we're not even thinking that, so we don't have to.
I
one
think
thing-
from where I sit on this is, as a parent, I have a daughter 12, another daughter 11, and a son 9. My wife and I both work. We both have working vehicles. Our jobs, we both work at the college, are relatively flexible there. And consistency is king for us. The more consistent you can be, the better that's going to be. What happened with the distance learning is, even for Catherine and I, my wife and I, when we were at home with our child, if an instructor changed something in that course of the week, and even if it was somewhat of a reasonable adjustment, we would still miss that, and we'd be literally looking at our son, and we'd miss an all-group meeting that maybe Zoom he was supposed to be a part of. So to throw that in as a parent, that's significantly more tricky. So I guess I would support what you're saying, and I know this is we're just throwing out some thoughts, but I appreciate the consistency. Let's, whatever we decide, let's do it now and then move forward. To toggle back and forth midweek, that'd be a concern for our own schedules. And again, we're pretty flexible professionally. We got, I guess I like what you're suggesting, and that makes sense.
And I think we can take back, Tom, your example, or those questions pushed back, why wouldn't we? I mean, I would really go back and rely on direction with John Anderson and Andrea Rusk, and in particular Andrea, with just the complexity of the course offerings at the high school and what it means to go back and forth. I think about chemistry labs, and I think about different things that are going on. So again, it's starting to create another pattern and an alternating pattern, which then expounds the workload that we're going to be putting on our teaching staff to do when we're already doubling the expectation of you're going to crosswalk in person, you're going to crosswalk distance. They've said, make it consistent.
And that toggling is what created stress for my children during the distance learning. That even though it was a small amount, but that toggling from their consistent day to day, that's what caused the stress, at least in our household. Not necessarily the work or the type of work. It was that toggling, that lack of consistency that sometimes popped up.
The lack of scheduling that we had in distance learning last spring was one of the most commented pieces. You know, the intent was noble to provide flexibility, but the end result was it was too much flexibility. You know, in the end, high structure is our friend in education, and coming back to a start time, end time, and at the 6 through 12 level, coming back to a bell schedule in the sense that, you know, class starts and ends at a particular time and there's transition time between it. Bringing back that sense of structure is what we heard loud and clear that we had to have.
And I'll go back to, Director Nystrom asked the question about extra help. Okay, one of the most frustrating things for our teachers is when a child fell off. Like they didn't hear from us. They hadn't logged in. They hadn't connected. So then we had principals and collaborative workers driving out to houses and things like that. They really wanted a focused, particularly at the secondary level, designated time and day where that is their focus for all learners. They're still required to have daily interaction and instruction, so that instruction has to occur, but they have to have a window because there's this pattern of things that are happening not physically in front of me. I need to follow up on that. And so if we add another full day of in-person instruction there, again, it's just creating a layer of workload, and that's talking to our staff. Parents were seeking that support time and that time because I'm still over in this mode right now. They're not going to have that if we fill every day up with that in-person learning at the secondary level. That was a significant concern from guidance counselors at the middle school, where they weren't getting that avenue to come in because everybody was on this very strict distance learning delivery. So really trying to merge that time together. And that was a recommendation coming from the faculty who are going to be responsible to distribute and implement this learning. They were really crying for that time because a lot of them, at first when we said, well, we're going to crosswalk, the first response was, give me another teacher. I'll be the in-person teacher, you be the distance learning teacher. We looked at that too. In some instances that works well. Elementary, middle school kind of, high school absolutely not.
So at the high school, oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
At the high school, will they still be kind of doing a win schedule, or will it be more standard?
No.
More standard.
Okay,
Prioritizing the instruction,
okay.
you know, and that's hard for teachers. Misty Job, English teacher, she's like, there's a lot of things I do to build relationships with my kids and monitor them. And like, we do times of silent reading because I want to see what they're interested in so I can have that conversation with them and really engage in their comprehension. Instruction and that contact time is important. Some of those things we've really had to condense.
One thing too, I think we haven't talked about with the middle school and the high school models is just the difference in what an educational setting looks like in an elementary versus a middle school and a high school. Just in an elementary, it's easier for us to have them in a space and to accommodate within that space. In high school, they might have band over at this area in the building, and then they have a math class somewhere else, and there's a lot of movement between the building, which causes cross-contamination. And there's going to be a lot more in-depth cleaning even that's going to have to happen because we are going to have kids in the hallways transferring from one place to the next to get to where they need to be, even lunch in some cases. And so it's just a different model. But we certainly could have one of the principals from, you know, John or Andrea or both of them come and talk a little bit more from their profession, you know, and their level.
I'm fine with the plan, I thought it was a good question. And
Yeah.
I-
Oh,
I
it's-
kind of- yeah.
It's a great, like,
There've been lots of good questions.
Great questions, yeah.
and again, we all jumped at, you know, 'cause we really, at our retreat, every level sat and said, I think we can get every kid in the building. We can get every kid in the building every day. And the truth of the matter is, with an empty Baxter Elementary, we could. But when you add 50% capacity and strict social distancing guidelines, we have to have the staff to be in front of them, you know, and be able to support that. And we know we're gonna have vulnerable staff, and I don't know that we have a budget to double our staffing model. Even if we had a budget, I don't know that we'd be realistically being able to find it. But that was where all of our brains went first. If you would've watched every principal run off, they were.
Yeah. So for lunch, they're gonna have it in classroom for what grades?
So we're gonna, I don't wanna answer that. We're gonna
Okay,
have
we don't know
Alyssa.
yet.
Alyssa has a very detailed plan.
Okay.
And-
That would be interesting to hear on.
And part of it is if when elementary, that's one of the reasons, elementary, because we've put them all in the building. Okay, they're not all gonna be able to go to the cafeteria. So Forest View, because only half of the 6th through 8th graders in the building, they very likely might have an opportunity to get into a cafeteria because we can mark off spaces and tables.
Yeah, but you said that was gonna be classrooms, I thought.
Potentially. So again, these are all the minutiaes.
Okay, so we're
Um,
not there yet.
No,
We need
but
another
in meals,
separate- we can
Alyssa
have
will
a
tell you,
separate
meals are gonna look
presentation.
really different. They're prepackaged.
Yeah.
She's getting very creative of how you can keep them hot and serving stations and moving serving stations within buildings so kids can access it more quickly.
Had just a couple more questions. What is the protocol if a student is tested positive? What do we have to do then with that particular classroom?
The current guidelines that they give us is each building is gonna have to have a COVID point person. So whether that's gonna be the building administrator or a building nurse that's there. Once a positive case comes, it's immediately reported to the Minnesota Department of Health. And they will give us very clear guidelines. So the good news is we are not making that call. We have not read that. We're, again, anticipating or guessing once they're a positive case, does that class go out in quarantine? When there starts to become so many within a school, does that school have to go out in quarantine? So not having those hard-driven facts yet that'll be coming, that was also why we made such a fluid model. Because if literally, let's say there's enough cases, so Baxter Elementary gets shut down, we feel with our models, they could shut down and the next day kids could be right on track with their learning. That was, you know, and part of that's been based on the work you guys have done and decisions you've made as a school board, knowing that every single student in our district, K-12, now has one-to-one access. If you see the internet access that was implemented, thanks to the support, you know, from our CTC partners and our mobile hotspots, and again, Sarah and her tech team, our families had access.
So we don't, not to interrupt, but we don't have the guidelines yet from the state on what the protocol is if there is someone tested positive, a student?
They will tell us exactly what we'll do.
But have they provided anything? So, I mean, there must be something out there that a third grade teacher, and I've got a student in my class, what is it that, they haven't provided that yet?
It's all done through MDH. MDH will go, they'll find out all the people that they've been around, they'll call those families, and then they'll give us guidance on how to handle it, based on what they learn. Once a COVID case is identified, then it's turned over to MDH. And that's why the COVID coordinator that we're going to have is going to be part of that. Our nurses are part of that. And they give us guidance, and then we just follow it.
So I can tell you, I mean, again, the real school-specific guidance is forthcoming, and that's why we'll have that direct public health supervisor. I'll give you the example of what's happened so far with staff. You know, so if a staff has suspected, so as we were in the spring with childcare this summer, if a staff suspected that they were demonstrating COVID symptoms, they immediately contacted our identified point person. They were put out, so they weren't allowed to come back to work until the results of their test were received. So that's how we've seen it happen. We haven't had a positive test come back within, you know, I'm very grateful for that. That's given us further direction on that, but they did. They had to wait till their test results came back before they could come return to work. But the minute they had any suspicion, they were removed.
I certainly appreciate the flexibility of all the hard work that we put in to be able to function at a distance if need be at the drop of the hat. But I know what's going on here. It's an all-out assault on a time-honored tradition of snow days and that anticipation of a young person waiting to hear if school's going to be called off. And I think that's been forever impacted.
We'll never have a snow day again.
Yeah, one of the projects we are working on is our e-learning day plan, where for up to 5 of what would have been snow days, that instruction continues because we have the distance learning capacity and some other pieces in place. So yes, the time-honored tradition of snow days may be significantly reduced.
And all we need is board approval on that.
Correct.
So as soon as we've got it ready, you'll be seeing it.
Might have a kids petition coming shortly.
I have a question on the task put forth to the teacher, the 6th through 12th grade teacher. So the other half of the kids that aren't in person on Monday and Tuesday, so they're going to be recording themselves that whole time because those kids are going to be...
It depends on what the learning target is relative to the curriculum.
But then they're stuck to their desk, or, I mean, I can't believe, you know, a lot of teachers have to move around.
We're looking at some technology options with cameras and microphones in classrooms. Again, depending on the nature of the class and the nature of the teacher's dynamic, you know, abilities, what kind of technology gets put in there.
Okay.
So, again, what we want is the decision about what the student who's in remote learning at that moment, we want that decision about what they're doing driven by what are the learning needs of the content at that point. So again, go back to all that work I make them do on curriculum maps, identifying learning target types and creating learning targets in student-friendly language. That should tell you what you're doing. Some days you might be assessing your live kids in the room, paper, pencil assessment. While that's going on, you may be doing something with the students who are remote. Or you might be running class discussion with all of them, or you might be doing guided reading or some form of work with those who are live, and the others are doing independent work that doesn't require them to either watch anything or listen to something. They may just be doing some writing for you. Again, it should be driven by the content that's being covered.
And the student's going to have to show that they're attending. So
Correct.
taking attendance.
One of the expectations that's different from last spring for both distance learning and now hybrid, which didn't exist last spring, is attendance must be taken the way it had always been taken. So the accountability for mandatory compulsory public education are back. The expectations of rigor are back. So that's why we're creating schedules to hold kids accountable, give them frameworks that they can buy into and be held accountable for. It also allows us to insist that there's real rigor to the learning. You know, some of the guidance we got last spring about assessment at the end of the year was soft. We couldn't fail anybody. Okay, we never wanted to fail anyone in the first place, but what we want to make sure is that there is evidence, real quality, specific evidence of student learning. We're back to that level of expectation, which we welcome. If we're gonna work this hard, we want them to learn.
Is there flexibility, and maybe you touched on this earlier, but is there flexibility within the contract, and would it be supported by faculty to capture, say, if a fourth grade, fifth grade teacher was working on fractions, and they got up on the board and they wrote a fraction out and walked through that process, but it was also video for those at home?
Yeah.
Is there flexibility to capture that? The reason is that one of the huge benefits, and I say this with a certain sense of humor, but one of the big benefits I found from our children being at home was sitting through those little video or videoettes that our teachers would put together for our children on things just like that, fractions, and to have them have access to that even after the fact for like supplemental instruction and whatnot. That was just fabulous, and I learned a lot myself just from that.
The short answer is absolutely. That's going to continue to go on. You know, when you heard me talk earlier about please don't record the teacher, we're talking about those live moments with the teachers being a human being with children. Okay? The teacher still has to be honored in her control of her class and how she manages her class. So it's very easy to take something out of context when you see something live that's occur. You may not have seen, you know, somebody light somebody's ponytail on fire, but you saw the teacher respond to that.
Right.
Okay, so we want to make sure that their dignity and their professionalism is preserved. But in terms of the instructional activities you're talking about, that's absolutely what we want to continue to have happen.
That'd be
And it will
great.
continue to have happen.
Wonderful, thank you.
There's one thing that we didn't talk about, and that's hand washing. Are we gonna have that regularly all day long? Because that's the number one way to stop the spread of germs. That's,
Yep.
So
Okay.
all of the guidelines we've been given,
okay.
face covering, social, we've talked about, you know, that's the nice thing about our new, I'm so excited about our new buildings. There's a sink in every
Yes.
classroom. You know, that doesn't exist in some of our buildings because they're still under construction, but providing that access. That's that safety plan that we will continue to build upon.
And the other one to add in is probably to add the face mask to the clothing guidelines, so they have no writing or.
Yeah, we've
Oh, yeah.
we've looked at our dress code policy.
On Monday.
Oh, yeah.
Interesting is that one for students and not for staff, so when you ask questions of how do we start to, there's a lot of pieces. But I've seen some funny ones. Kids are starting to post, you know, from different characters.
Yeah.
They're having some fun.
Having some fun with it.
Yeah,
Lane's
sure.
having some fun with her polka dots. I'm like, well, Tim even has some tie-dye. I guess I'm not having very much fun.
So,
with my plan.
Bob, I think you have a question?
Actually, just a comment. I just wanted to thank you two, Superintendent Larson, the principals that have worked so hard in just 1 week. I think the community wanted a clear and concise plan, and I think you're presenting that today. I'm blown away by your presentation, by the way. You guys have worked so hard on this. I can't even imagine the stress level that you've been through. And this is something so unusual for our community, something that has not happened in 100 years. And we are going to get through this. And I think the community also wants to work with the school district to make this work. And I think the other thing is a lot of the parents have to really plan for this. And I think you're giving that through your plan, and we can make a decision Monday night, and then the parents can plan for the start of the school year. So anyway, thank you for all you've done in that week.
So
That's
I
why
had,
we started with thank yous, because it's been hours and hours of union leadership, teachers, parents. It's been amazing to see how much people care about our kids.
There might be two people presenting in front of you, but we're not the two that matter. It's the almost 1,000 employees and community members standing behind us that put the hours in.
And just so the board knows too, at that front table over there is a list of all of the communication that we've been receiving from the public. If you remember, we had asked that if they had questions or whatever regarding school start, to please just let us know. This table right here, this 3-ring binder.
Oh, okay, thank you.
It's also got the survey results in it, and so any communication that we've received for this board meeting or Monday's board meeting regarding the school start, we aren't going to be reading them aloud at the board meetings. Instead, they're going to be available for people to look at your leisure and to look at it. There's just, I really like to think, as I've read through pretty much all of them, that I believe that the plan that we're proposing to you today fits and aligns with what the people are asking us to. So please help yourself to that 3-ring binder, and we encourage you to read that communication. But we will, I want to say that one more time, just for announcements for next Monday, that we will not be reading any of those aloud during public input. There's just too many and too long, and they're real repetitive, and so, but they're available for anybody to read who wants to read them, so. Yeah.
So I had one more question, looking a little bit on the future, and I understand a couple weeks ago, we were at like 2.2 cases per 10,000, today 7.7, and hard to predict where we'll be at the beginning of the school year. It could be up, it could be down from that. Should it actually go down, and maybe this would be part of the resolution that you're looking for board approval, Lane, that, you know, again, it'd be nice to have some guidelines that at what time, at what state will we make a change?
Sure.
And, you know, perhaps next week we find out that we're at 6.2 and the following week we're 4.3. You know, do we allow 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and then, you know, potentially then that we are 100% in classroom? Because, you know, currently today, we could have all students back every day, correct?
As of today, yep.
As of today,
As of
but
today.
knowing that, you know, that it could change, but, and not necessarily allow us to, and that's what we're planning for right now, which is fine. But we're a month away as well, and, you know, should we not get any worse than a 7.7, again, at what stage would we trigger that we're going to go back in the classroom? So I'd like us to, you know, think about that a little bit too, I think would be great. And I think as we share with our community and our parents, you know, we have to make sure they understand that we're gonna provide the consistency, but know that the consistency might be, when it feels right, we're gonna shift to a more in-classroom scenario too.
Yeah. I actually have a sample of it with me right now. I didn't realize that I had brought it, but what that I'm gonna visit with the board chair and vice chair in prep for Monday's meeting. But the language that I have in there right now is something to the effect that on Monday we would approve that we would tentatively start in the hybrid model. And then as we move forward, and this is a little bit different, we've actually changed this yesterday from what I have written on here. But then on August 24th, if it really spikes one way or the other, the Board of Education will still have the authority at that time to say, absolutely not, we're gonna distance learn, or we're gonna start with something else. But at least it gives parents a place to start planning.
Yeah.
And that's what we're hoping, and that's why I've got all this written stuff in there instead of just saying, this is what we're gonna do and be
Good,
done with
good,
it.
thank you.
And we can talk about that
Sure.
as we get a little
Okay.
closer.
Good, thank you.
Can I add
Yeah,
one more
yeah,
thing? Just,
please.
I don't know if any of you have had the chance to listen to Dr. Michael Osterholm at all. I heard him on Carrie Miller. And one of the things that really struck what he said is, and I've always been a relationship person, but focus on relationship in the classroom first, because we have to consider we could have a quick shutdown. And the mental and physical health, which you had as number one priority, is all important. So even though we talked about really focusing on academics, on top of that, we need to focus on the relationships.
We won't
So-
have success in a hybrid or distance learning. We won't have success in any learning model without the relationship being there first.
Yeah.
That's the prerequisite for learning.
And I haven't said this, but I agree with you completely, and that's what I love about our hybrid model, is that what it does is it brings at least the kids up to age 10, like the recommendations, it brings them to school every day.
Yeah.
And sure, their day is a little bit shorter to accommodate all the things that we've talked about here, but it also puts into place many protocols that are going to help us to keep our schools safe and our teachers healthy. Because it makes us social distance. It makes us have kids more widespread throughout the classroom, throughout the school. It has our kids all wearing face coverings and our staff. It has us doing the hand washing protocols. It has all of those things in place, whereas you bring everybody in, just on a regular day, and we're not doing as many of those protocols to try to keep everyone healthy and well, and to keep our building clean so that the COVID doesn't spread in our building. And so that's what I love so much about this hybrid model, is that we're doing just that. We're trying to bring the kids in as much as we can so they have that interaction with their teacher. It just is in a little bit shortened day so that the teachers can do their other work with the distance learning and their collaboration and prep as well. Our teachers I have to say this, they have been absolutely phenomenal. They have come, they are not working right now. And they have been coming in and just saying, you know what, we're partners in this process. Tell us how we can make this happen. And, just as I was walking in here, a couple teachers said, we can do this. This is going to work. And so it's just blessed their hearts because they want to be with their kids all year too. And so, that's the beauty of it. Everybody has that same goal.
All right, great, thanks. Thank you, Heidi, Tim, and Lane, and the entire staff for this recommendation. So obviously, we're not looking to make any approval or anything tonight. We'll do that Monday.
Okay?
Okay? Okay. We have one last item to visit about. Charlie, are you still with us?
Yeah, I am. All you do.
Guys.
Thank you.
My turn. Thanks for having me in. I would just like to, kind of piggyback upon some of their commentary about the work that's taking place at a rapid pace as information gets presented to us. If you look back to the shutdown last spring and the extension of distance learning to the end of the school year, before even many businesses were reopened, the Department of Health started to issue guidelines for youth sports, organized youth sports, and how might we be able to do these things. And I'll remind you that it is, my philosophy and belief that sports in particular are not the most important thing that our school district does, but it's something that people care about quite a lot. And there is great value and great benefit to its participants, and I don't want to minimize that. But it is always secondary to the instruction, the education of our children, right? And it supports that instruction, and we think it offers a different kind of platform that we can engage kids. We talked about the importance of relationships and just really this living, breathing laboratory for navigating the challenges of life, right? A great platform to do that. And so we've been given some opportunity over the course of the summer to put some protocols in place, to have some activity. Our kids have been pretty busy, all age levels this summer. And to my knowledge, we've had very little or zero at this point known athlete-to-athlete COVID transmission. Any sort of transmission that's happened has usually come from some outside gathering, a sleepover, together at a cabin, something like that. But we've seen very little, so it's been met with success. The Minnesota State High School League is obviously had canceled last spring's sports season. They were really forced to do that. The executive order shut our buildings down. They were not to be used except for food service and for childcare. And of course, our programs, most of programs use our school facilities in some way, shape, or form. Executive order didn't allow that to happen. So there was really no option but to shut our spring sports down. And that happened, I suppose, towards the end of April when that decision was finally announced. Moving forward, the High School League has, again, following in the footsteps of Governor Walz and the Department of Health, are issuing, if you will, kind of some return to play guidelines and decisions. And so it's important to know that every decision the league makes, it is in alignment with the Department of Health and Governor's executive order. And so they had a board meeting on Tuesday of this week. I'm still getting information almost in real time. Decisions have been made, and the questions you're all asking, I'm asking them too, still at this point. So there's a lot of questions that maybe you'll have for me that I just simply today won't be able to answer, but I'm just going to give you the latest information to know how we're planning to move forward. I think the biggest and most consequential decision from the High School League Board of Directors was that football and volleyball were moved to a new fourth season, which is basically an early spring season. No specific dates, but I would approximate mid-March to mid-May. Our traditional spring sports are essentially going to go from mid-May to mid-July. There's some advantage to that. It's really nice weather mid-May to mid-July, and our spring sports around here put a tremendous amount of time and energy into indoor practice because of our lengthy winters and usually delayed spring. But it also presents some challenges with work schedules and seniors just needing to work, really kind of wanting to check out shortly after graduation, right? And so we think there's going to be some challenges with that. Our individual sports, traditional fall individual sports, cross country, girls swimming and diving, girls tennis are all going to happen. I will say as usual, but of course with appropriate restrictions and modifications. We can only have dual matches, and so limited number of teams, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. Because we are in a hybrid model, we have travel limitations. We can run our buses at 50% capacity. So we're sorting through what does that look like? Does that mean we have to make roster limitations? Do we only have certain levels compete when we schedule an opponent? Again, the minutia, haven't sorted through all of that yet, but these are the challenges and questions that are in front of us. In addition to some of those safety measures, the Central Lakes Conference Schools ADs met yesterday, and in an effort to try to limit the footprint of where our kids are going and with whom they're interacting, we are going to work together as a pod of schools, and we are not going to play anybody outside of that pod. And so we also know that we have a responsibility to take care of non-conference schools like Moorhead and Bemidji, who are big schools that do not have a lot of natural rivalries near them. And so we've actually kind of in an emergency fashion asked them to become de facto members of our conference during a COVID emergency. This gives us 11 schools. We have a reduced number of contests. We will be playing 30% fewer contests. Our seasons will be shortened by 20%, and we are only going to play each other. So what we know is that when we play Bemidji is not going to be traveling to East Grand Forks. They're not going to be traveling to Thief River. They're not going to be traveling to Lake of the Woods and exposing their kids in those areas. When we play Wilmer, we know Wilmer is not going to be going to Worthington. They're not going to be going to Marshall. We are only going to play each other. And so that is our task right now. But we're still waiting detail. How many contests can we have? We know that the number is a 30% reduction, but that gives us a decimal number. We have challenges like, well, what does that mean in tennis? Because tennis, you have 16 dates on which you can play, but you have 28 matches that you're allowed to play as an individual. So which number do we calculate the 30% for? Right, and so there are a lot of questions, I think, in that regard. No decisions at this time have been made for winter sports or for spring sports. All tournaments right now, postseason tournaments, are to be determined. I would say it's probably unlikely this fall that there would be any kind of postseason other than some creative ways to determine conference championships outside of a large-scale event with multiple teams. So I would welcome any questions that you might have. Again, I don't know that I'll have an answer for you, but did want to provide you kind of with the latest update that I can regarding the world of co-curricular activities.
So this fall, we will have soccer, girls swimming, and cross-country, correct?
And girls tennis.
And girls tennis.
Yep. Yep, boys and girls soccer. And I guess it's important to note, too, the rationale for moving football and volleyball and keeping the others. If you look, first of all, the board of directors for the State High School League is made up of representatives from every corner of the state, right? It's a 20-member board. There are superintendents, activities director, boys coaching reps, girls coaching reps, music reps, governor's appointees. So this 20-member board represents pretty much every corner of the state, every size school, every school demographic that you could possibly think of. And as they look at making decisions for football and volleyball, every school in Minnesota has football and has volleyball. And the likelihood of a season being shut down shortly after school starts could be pretty high. Not every school has soccer. Not every school has girls tennis. Not every school has cross-country. 75% of the schools in Minnesota are small, outstate, rural schools. They don't look like us. And so that all factors in when the board's making that decision. Currently, 3 counties in southwestern Minnesota are distance learning based on their COVID numbers. So that decision to play football and volleyball on August 17th would mean those schools and kids right now in those counties would not have the opportunity to have those seasons. And so that was a heavy, kind of meaty decision for that board to make. And it's not easy when you're making decisions in a collective body like that apply to all schools. And so this is the result of that decision. And we have kind of a limited schedule. And volleyball, the big concern was it's indoors. It's harder to, the science is telling us that we need to be much more vigilant indoors. And football, because of the physical nature of the game, the risk is just deemed to be too great.
When is boys tennis, and is the girls going to have dual meets, or doubles play, or just singles play?
They will have doubles play, and boys tennis operates in the springtime, and so that would happen in theory mid-May to July. And again, a great advantage is we typically reschedule most of our events in the early part of May and squeeze everything in about 4 weeks between the end of May or the end of April and the end of May before our postseasons begin. So I do think that will be an advantage, that we'll have nice weather to participate in our spring activities. And then just one more comment as I close. If at any time for example, if we come back to in-person learning, right, these restrictions that we've kind of created for ourselves, some of the safety precautions would still be there, but we would be able to fill a bus, for example, right? We would be able to exceed that 50% capacity. Likewise, if our COVID rates move up and we're forced into a distance learning model, at that point, our coaching contact would be virtual only. And again, because the high school league does need to operate in concert and alignment with the Department of Health and Governor's executive order, that's the way that's going to flow for us. It's really nice to know that. We're hoping that we can stay safe, that the spread is just steady and contained versus heavy spikes, so that we can provide these opportunities the best we can.
Charlie, for the sports that are already participating, do you find the numbers are down? And also, do you see hockey being played this winter?
Great question. What's been really, I think, the toughest part of this is a lot of sports are happening, including hockey right now. So the idea of not playing a sport is, to me, pretty unlikely. The high school league is committed to providing an opportunity for all sports to have a season this year. They don't want to move seasons if they can help it, but I think that we are committed to making sure we have that hockey season. What was your first part of that question?
In the sports that are participating now, are your numbers down?
Yeah, that's a good question. We're not sure. In our camp numbers, we've really liked our participation in our camp numbers. I think it's indicative of kids that were sitting around all spring without a lot to do and wanting to get out. We've also had such beautiful weather. We've seen participation tail off as summer has, kind of moved on, which we can expect. But we've liked that, so we're encouraged. And we're also encouraged that this additional fourth season is going to give some kids the opportunity to try a sport that they previously had a conflict with. So, for example, we might have some soccer players that also want to play football, or we might have football players that want to try playing soccer. And so we could see some of that happening too at the high school level. But Bob, it's a concern when we're in a hybrid model. And we have practice on a Tuesday, but you're in the Thursday, Friday group, in the B group, and you're not actually at school. That transportation piece back to campus, that's absolutely a concern for us, and that's just something we're going to have to wrestle with as a program as we go throughout this school year.
Good, thank you, Charlie. A lot to juggle and manage as well.
Yeah.
Huge, yeah.
Well, we're going to make the best that we can because our kids deserve that. So, thank you, Tom.
Any other questions, comments from the board? All right, good, thank you,
Great.
Charlie.
Thank you for your work.
All right, there's some additional meetings, as we know, our main school board coming up on Monday. Is there anything else to come before the board? If not, how about a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
And then we'll go through the board agenda.
Okay.
I have